We are tired.
And sleepy. We've had an hour and a half sleep. Oh, and we're married. Heather and I are here in Canada. This is the first place we've actually stopped since we've gotten here. We just flew in, got in the car, and now we're in a place called Canmore. And we're alongside the Bow River right here. And we got some beautiful mountains in the background. I just took a couple of handheld shots of them with the R6 Mark II and the 24-105 f4L. It's really beautiful here. It's almost overwhelming. There's some power lines going across that kind of mess the shot up, but otherwise it's really pretty. And there's a lot of dynamic range. There's bright light on some of the mountains, and other parts of the mountains are really dark. So we'll have to see how that comes out. But we got about 2 hours of sleep, maybe an hour and a half last night. Tried to sleep a little bit, maybe slept for 20 minutes on the plane coming out here. But both of us are exhausted, and we have reservations for dinner in 2 or 3 hours. So anyway, we're starting. I said in that video clip that I was using the 24-105 to make photographs of this mountain, but the one that I actually liked, I was using the 100-500. And here's a cell phone photograph that Heather made of me standing there with the mountains in the background and the 100-500. Here is the first picture of the trip, and I was pretty happy with the way it turned out. I was able to crop the power lines out of the bottom of the photograph, and I thought the mountains turned out beautiful. I like the dappled light on them. And we had some interesting clouds that first day. A couple of days later, we had no clouds at all, which was kind of a bummer. So this is with the 100-500 lens at 100 millimeters. And like I said in the video clip, I shot it handheld, 1/1250th of a second, f4.5, ISO 100, and pretty happy with the first shot. So I'm walking across the engine bridge is what they call it here in Canmore over the Bow River, and apparently they used it in the Last of Us TV show. And I thought I might try to get a picture of it, but I don't know, it's not that photogenic. But after we walked across the bridge, Heather said, "Hey, look at that." And that was pretty cool. So I set up the R6 Mark II and the 24-105, and I made a couple of shots. I made a pano, and then I made a multiple exposure, just two exposures, two exposed for the foreground and for the mountains. And maybe one of those two will come out. If so, let's take a look. So as I said in the clip, I made two versions of this. The first one was a panorama with a few shots stitched together using the 24-105 at 28 millimeters, 1/250th of a second, f9, ISO 100. And this is the pano. And even though it's not a high dynamic range shot, because I needed a high dynamic range because the mountains had a lot of light on them and these trees in the foreground didn't. But in this single shot, I was able, well, multi-shot for width, but single shot in terms of dynamic range, I was able to pull the shadows and the trees in the foreground looked fine. So here is the HDR shot. And this was two shots. One I exposed for the mountains and the clouds, and the other I exposed for the trees in the foreground. And I was able to pull the shadows enough to where I don't really need high dynamic range. So I didn't do any more HDR the entire trip. This is the only one right here, very similar to the pano shot, which is this one. And like I say, I think the pano looks better. It's a little bit wider, and pulling the shadows gave me just as much light on the foreground. So lesson learned, don't need HDR, at least not with the Canon R6 Mark II and its good dynamic range sensor. Heather and I walked from our hotel here in the town of Banff, which is the Moose Lodge. We walked to, what's the name of our restaurant?
The Bluebird Wood-Fired Steakhouse, I think.
Bluebird Wood-Fired Steakhouse. It was really good. We had prime rib and key lime pie, that's right. And I brought my camera, just the R6 with the 24-105, thinking I might take some pictures on the walk. And I did take a couple, but the only one I like is of this church that's about halfway between those two locations. This is a 37 millimeter shot of the church across the street. A lot of sun on it about right here. It's just about overexposed, but it's not. And it is ISO 320 handheld f7.1 1/1600th of a second at 37 millimeters. There also was a school nearly right across the street from our hotel, Banff High School, and I wish I had made a photograph of it, but I never did. So I regret that. But this church was really cool, and I like the mountain in the background right here. Just a nice place to walk around is the town of Banff. We are staying here at the Moose Hotel and Suites in Banff. It's really cool. And right now I'm out in the courtyard, kind of behind the lobby, and there's hotel rooms all the way around. But in the center is this old historic house that was built in 1903, and they just built the whole resort around it and left it standing. It's really something. I didn't do a very good job making final clips of the day on this trip. On this first day, I had an excuse because we were completely exhausted, but I've got no excuses for the rest of the day, so I may be saying goodbye during the thank you screen. I hope you enjoyed this content. If you did, hit the thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell if you want to see some more. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.